Hi and welcome to Car Mechanical for part 1 of Project Oynx roller paint job. So in this video what we're going to be doing is we're going to be prepping the car for painting by sanding it all over with the orbital sander, and then we're going to move on to the painting itself. So if you've watched any of the series so far, you'll see that I've done lots of the prep to remove rust issues on the car. If you don't have rust issues, you can go straight onto this, and what we're doing here is we're using an orbital sander to create a key on the paint so the paint could be painted onto. This is actually going to be the same if you were spray painting the car. Now the reason I'm roller painting the car is because I don't have access to a paint booth or a garage that I could fully enclose the car, and I'm having to paint it outside on the road. So what I'm doing here is I'm using a random orbital sander which does a really good job of sanding the paint back and getting it really smooth as opposed to doing it by hand. And with the orbital sander I'm getting all of the big areas, the big volumes of things that need sanding. So what we're going to do, I'm going to just show you on the roof as well exactly how I use it. And the orbital sander is really good because what it does all the work for you. You need to apply only a little bit of downward pressure, but it will just do all the work for you. And you can see as we move across, it's creating this key on the paint, and it's taking off the top coat and it's keying the normal layers of paint underneath that we're going to be painting onto. So again, I've mentioned in the cost of this video, but my random orbital sander was about £23. You do get them various prices. You might have an airline, you can get them for that. But the reason you want the random orbital one is because of the way that it takes everything off. Okay, so what I'm doing, I'm literally going over the whole car and I'm doing the big areas as such. And once we've done that, we'll move on to getting the more detailed areas. The whole sanding of the car probably took an hour, maybe two. And the things that can really stretch that time out are little things like this. And this is the number plate adhesive, and it really took a lot of work to find the best way to take it off. So I tried using a scraping blade, which got a lot of it off, but not all of it. I tried various things, and then I found that the panel wipe that I've got did an excellent job of breaking down all of this adhesive. So I went over everything and took that off. And then continuing, I take off the paint, or I sand back the bonnet. Now you do end up using quite a few sanding discs, and it is worth making sure that you do change them as soon as the sanding doesn't look as uniform as it used to be. So as I mentioned, this does take quite a while to do all of the sanding, but it really is worth it, and the longer you spend on the prep the better. So this is why I spent so long getting all the previous prep done with all the rust. Okay, so with the main bulk of the body sanding done, we actually need to go around and get some of the smaller details. So if I just pop open the door here, I've just got some sandpaper, and I just want to get these little edges that you're never going to hit when you're using the orbital sander. And I'm just going to do the same. Literally, it's sanding all of the gaps, so because you want the paint to get in there, but if it's not sanded, it won't stick properly. And also there's certain bits that you're just never going to get to with the orbital, as I mentioned. So we're going to do these roof bars, we're going to do all around the windows, we're going to do in between the bumpers, around the roof line. Basically everywhere you want to get paint into that the machine's not going to get to, you're going to need to sand. So this does take a little while. I'm just giving you a quick overview, but again, it's one of those things that will benefit you in the long run. So once we have done that, we can move on to the next stage as well, because we need to prep the car a bit more. So we're going to take the indicator out as well. Take out anything that you can that's going to make it easier for prepping and painting. Ideally, I should have maybe taken out the rear lights, but I end up taping them up, as I'll show you in a minute. And the orbital sander can't get under there, so I had to hand sand this bit. I also didn't prep the wing mirrors on this because of I decided to come back to that in the future. So here I'm using panel wipe, and I'm just using some rag that you can buy, and the panel wipe does a really good job of lifting out all of the dust. You might not think there's any, but when you look at the rag you can just see how much is on there. So you need to panel wipe the entire car before you go on to go and paint it. So this is the car all sanded, all prepped, all panel wiped, and I'm just going to give you a walk around and a look at it. And you can see some bits are sanded a bit heavier than others. That's around disc changeover. But we're about ready now to actually start the roller paint job. Or we would be ready if we needed to do the next stage of prep, which is masking off. So we'll cover that in a minute as well. But again, I just really wanted to give everyone a good view of what the car looks like when it is fully sanded down. I think it's something in some videos you don't get the most amount of detail for. And also, I've tried to do it as smooth as possible. So I think I've used like a 120 or a 240 grit to sand back. Now, with how we're going to paint it, it doesn't actually matter too much, but I can just show you how we're trying to get that key for the paint to go onto. Now coming here, I've been around with blue painter's tape, and I've blue painter's taped up all of the parts of the car where paint could overspill onto with the roller. So all around the windows, all around the boot windows and the rear lights. I've done it around some of the lower trim because if I decided to paint the lower trim separately, because it's plastic, it needs some extra treatment. And again, same with the windows, same along the roof line because I don't want the windscreen getting anything. And then with the headlights and the front grille as well, and then that lower trim's all been masked off. Okay, so let's move on to the actual roller budget paint job itself. So I'm using Rust-Oleum Combi Colour, and you'll have to excuse the random assortment of tools and makeshift jugs. When I was doing this, I left some of my tools at home, and I'm actually painting on a friend's driveway. So what I did, I just took a Pepsi bottle and just made some marks on it for where I wanted to measure into. So we're going to actually, I think do we go for 50-50 or do I go for 70-30 on this? I think I'll go 50-50. So I'll go 50-50 on the Rust-Oleum and mix that with 50% of white spirit. Also, you might know that as mineral spirits. There are other thinners you can use. In keeping this as budget as possible, I've done it with white spirits because it's £4 for a big bottle of it. And I'm having to makeshift and mix this in the paint tray because I left the jug at home. So I'll just put it into the paint tray and I'll pour it back into the bottle in a minute. One of the things you can see I've done on this, I've used a tarp for the painting, and this saves my friend's driveway from so much mess. So you mix the two together and you get that kind of really thin consistency. You can use different thicknesses. I found 60-40 I think to be about the best. 50-50 really does dry quick as well. So now it's mixed up. I've poured some into the tray, and I'm just going to give it a quick mix up in case it's had any separation. And we're going to get it onto the roller, and we need to squeegee the roller out. This is one of the most important parts of how you're going to paint the car, and as I'll get into the later videos, my technique gets better. My technique here isn't great. You do not want the roller soaking wet. You want the roller as almost as dry as you can make it, just to be able to get the paint onto the car. And you should probably only work in one direction as well. I don't make the right judgment of doing that. I go all over when I start, and I think if I'd have gone in one direction for the entire paint job, it would have made things much easier. Now, as you roller on, you want to be using it as dry as possible on your roller, and you want to be going over and smoothing out the bubbles. I'm probably working at too fast a pace here, and in a later video you'll see that I use 2 rollers. However, I'm going to go over everything, and you're going to spread the paint out, and it does start to go off fairly quickly. So you want to work in one section at a time. But you can see as it's going on, we're getting a nice consistent colour pretty quickly. And you're just going to go over, and as you see any sort of streaks, like if you've got any bits that are running, you're just going to work it around over the entire bonnet. So that's actually pretty much what I do here, because it's all quite wet. I'm just working over the entire bonnet to remove the bubbles. Now, because of the white spirit mix, the bubbles do pop out. And you also lift the bonnet like I did there, just to paint the edge. So again, I'm showing you here that I really do try and dry out the roller a bit more. And the 2 roller technique, which you'll see in the third coat, works much better because if you use a wet roller and a dry roller to spread it. But again, I'm just showing you how you do it on the roof. And another thing that's worth pointing out, I'm really not a great painter or decorator. I'm doing all of this with the most amateur of skills. I will be hoping that some of you guys watching, you're probably better at this than me. You can probably use a better application, and you might find that the way you mix your paint as well will differ. But with how you mix your paint, it's going to vary from parts of the year. So in the summer, it's going to go off quicker, whereas in the winter, it's going to dry slower. So when you're using your thinners, you're going to take that into account. Now, when you're doing these edges, you want to go as close to the edge as possible, and you want to be fairly slow. And don't push down too hard on your roller. I'm putting a bit of pressure there, which releases maybe a bit too much paint. But we're going to cover the edges on another part anyway. So just go as close to the edge as you can and just get your nice coat. And this is where we get to where I've been over the whole car. So the whole of the car's had 1 and a bit coats just to smooth everything out. And you can see some of the roller marks that are in there. I'm hoping that by the end of the job, when that's been addressed with some wet sand, and it's going to smooth everything out. But I'm just going to give you the view over the whole car now it has been painted. And For the first coat, that's actually not too bad. So I'm going for a satin black finish at the end of it. It might kind of contradict the name of the Project Oynx, but I like the Onyx black. So in part 2, what we're going to do is we're going to move on to the next coat. However, there are some bits I've done here that are perhaps a bit too thick. So join me in part 2, where we'll deal with some of the issues I've created for myself in part 1. And we'll put the second coat on and we'll move ahead towards a closer point of finishing the budget roller paint job. Okay guys, thanks for watching. Remember to hit subscribe if you'd like to see the rest of the series or the videos I do. If you do have any comments, please leave them in the comment section below and share this with any of your friends you think will like the video.